So, the next one, as has been mentioned, is the monomyth. How many of you guys are familiar with the monomyth? We also call it the hero's journey. More hands went up on that. Hero's journey is a circular storytelling methodology in which this was described by many writers. Joseph Campbell is the most famous, but certainly not the first or even really the best, who talked about this. It goes back to Greek times, and the concept for this one is viewing a story as a circle. This one, you start off with the hero in a place of ignorance. Someone else is probably going to be able to do this better than I am because my hero's journey, I'm going to need refreshers. But somewhere along the way, he meets the impact character. The impact character is the one who usually extends the call to arms. And then the impact character leaves. Usually they are killed.
You said Joseph Campbell was not necessarily the best. Is there another book or any?
You would have to go to the folklorists. They just tell me Campbell isn't the best because Campbell wasn't good at citing resources, doing citations and things. A lot of my folklore teachers didn't really like Campbell because of that, because he did a good job of describing, but he didn't credit other people. And he then became like the big famous one for this when it was more of a body of work, is what I've been told. I don't know that. I read Here of the Thousand Faces, and I thought it was a very useful book. We'll talk about the foibles with it. But someone might be able to Google this and find out where I'm missing. But impact character, call to arms, impact character leaves, things go wrong, and we have what we call the belly of the well, or the descent into the underworld. Does anybody have this up? The hero's journey as the circle. So this is the low point for your character. You envision it as, they have the call to arms and all this stuff. And in this one, I believe, this is you have the moment of decision where you really kind of take life into your own hands. You have the defeat the evil. And then back up here, you have the return in wisdom to where you began. I'm sure I forgot something in there. But the idea is, with the hero's journey, you always end up where you began for a true hero's journey. Yes?
So there would be a lot of overlap between this and, let's say, the three-act structure. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. These are all ways of visualizing the same concepts. However, there are going to be slight differences. For instance, in the hero's journey type of archetype, usually the hero is making their decision much later. And this kind of harkens back to the ancient Greek structure, where there's a whole lot of woe is me going on for a big part of the story, until kind of you have the call to arms, which is kind of a half call where you're like kind of accepting, but then it's then you kind of take destiny in your own hands, and then you return with wisdom, having become a new person, having experienced the depths of the absolute depths of despair. You've got it up? Yeah.
I pulled it up, and it says that moment, they call it the atonement.
The atonement.
It comes
That's
after
right.
the transformation that went after you passed through the abyss.
Right. A transformation. Okay.
And then that first section there, where like the impact character
Yeah.
leaves, the hero passes through challenges and temptations and has helpers along the way. Sometimes supernatural aid.
Okay, supernatural aid. This is the gods are helping.
Mm-hmm. And then there's like a line across the top, that whole top section is the known section. And
Oh, yeah.
everything below it is unknown.
Known and unknown. Okay. So I basically did get it. I'm impressed by that. But it's because it's basically trying to describe the same sort of story. But the hero's journey actually has some very specific things to it that a lot of people then adapt and whatnot. And it depends. I mean, if you like this storytelling archetype, the one thing that I warn you about is a lot of people who get into the hero's journey get into it so much that they start looking at it as a checklist for things to do in their story. George Lucas did this. Joseph Campbell was a mentor of George Lucas's, and George Lucas actually did a series of PBS specials talking about the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell did one, and then George Lucas did like the follow-up. Very deeply his student. Like, He talks about this a lot, and the original Star Wars movies kept left out some of the things for the hero's journey, and so you'll notice in the prequels him trying to better align himself to the hero's journey. For instance, the virgin birth is a big part of the hero's journey and didn't exist in Star Wars until the new Star Wars movies came out, where he wanted it, and I felt it was shoehorned in. It didn't fit the story he was telling, but he felt like, I need this because this is part of the true hero's journey, and so he put it in. And that's where you kind of run into trouble with any of these things, and when you're like, oh, I have to put this in because it's part of the archetype I'm working from, where these are really describing stories. You get that concept that Joseph Campbell described what a lot of stories had and brought together all the elements that were popular in a lot of them, but none of those stories had each of these elements. And so if you try to write a story making sure you hit each point on these elements, instead your framework becomes too rigid, and you're using something that was used to describe a story to then write your own story, and so you're making a copy of a copy, rather than using this to inform you and help you develop your own story more fully. And that's a thin line to walk, but I think it's an important one to be aware of. Anyone else have anything to say on the hero's journey, or any questions? It can be really useful, yeah.
So, sorry.
Yeah.
On the first one that you talked about, kind of
Yeah.
this one, but it's a little harder to describe. Like, when I'm thinking of introducing like characters, when you should have most of your characters introduced is probably Act 1.
Yeah, oh, you can still introduce some characters in Act 2, but you basically most of them by Act 1, and this certainly by the Descent,
that,
you should have all of your main players in place.
Can you go into a little bit more detail with the known and the unknown, and how ignorance at the beginning, I mean...
Oh, wait, these are yours. I can throw you one anyway. That was not bad. Yeah. Well, the concept of the hero's journey is really is about information. It's about the growth of a hero from innocent to wise, to the point that there's almost an implication that the impact character, that the hero is becoming the impact character. The impact character, by the way, is a screenwriting term of you usually have when you tell a story, you'll often have an ignorant character beginning your story, and someone will come into it who is kind of the one who changes that person's life dramatically. Yes?
I think Aragon is a really transparent example of this, where it's obvious to see.
Right, the hero's journey, yeah. And there are a lot, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but yeah, that is, the hero's journey is pretty visible, but that's, so is it in Star Wars. Star Wars, it's really quite obvious with the hero's journey, and he makes it more and more obvious as the series goes along, to its detriment, I think. Yeah.
Also, one thing that I just remember hearing about this and the end of Act 2 is usually... Yes, I caught it. Okay. Is that, like, the hero's supposed to, like, think they're actually going to win, like, right before they hit the belly of the whale? Is that...
Right, that's common.
Like,
yeah,
and then they fall further than ever.
Yeah, you don't have to do that, but it certainly is a good plot archetype. Yes, we've got this. It's kind of the calm before the storm. Everything seems to be going all right. We're doing okay. I do these often in my books because it feels like a natural breather to take, and then bam, everything goes crazy wrong.
My question is, how you talk, obviously we don't follow these strictly, because often as I read a story, I get bothered when it's like, he's a poor orphan farm boy raised by some not family member who bad things happen, he goes off on a mystical adventure. It happens in like so many novels that it gets boring.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just kind of curious as to, do you purposely try to deviate from this sort of
I do.
journey? And like, in what sort of ways do you try to do that?
I try. Sometimes I do the whole postmodern thing, like in Mistborn. Postmodern, by the way, not meaning postmodern, but really modernist, where it's self-aware, that it says, okay, I'm building upon this framework, and so I'm therefore going to deviate from step one. You know the framework, I'm going to evoke it in early scenes, and then I'm going to go horribly wrong. That's something I do. Mostly, though, I just go on instinct. We haven't gotten to the way I storytell yet. I don't use any of these. These are academic ways that I think are useful for describing it, and they are very useful for some. Howard uses 3-act very religiously. Dave uses the try-fail cycle thing very religiously. It tells good stories for him. We haven't hit what I do yet, and maybe when I explain to you what I do, it'll help you.
Maybe I should just wait for you to kind of explain everything, but I mean, I'm really looking like, how do you know when you've got this great plot? Is it you just really enjoy reading it yourself?
Yeah, I'll tell you about that. I'll tell you how I view it, and that might help you. But all right, we'll go on, and then maybe at the end we'll have more questions after I've kind of described mine. By the way, Orson Scott Card has a great one called The Mice Quotient. Have any of you guys read Mice Quotient? I will just send you to do it. Mice is milieu, idea, character, event. Am I right? And you can read his essays on it. I can't do it justice in this amount of time, though. We did a Writing Excuses where Mary explained it quite well. But Mice Quotient is you decide for a given scene or novel or short story whether it's a milieu, which is his word to make it fit the acronym, which means setting. A setting story, a character story, an event story, or an idea story, and you then begin by leading with that character, if it's a character story, and then you end with that character's change. That's what the hero's journey basically is. But for science fiction, you lead with an idea, and you end the story when the idea has, what is it? I didn't even know Mice that well. But anyway, go read it. It's worth looking at. I should be better at mice than I am, but I've never... It took me a long time to wrap my head around mice, and I still don't quite have it. If I sat down with it, I could figure it out.